Welcome back to another episode of Van Life Unfiltered. I'm Tori Delory, and this week we are going to have some great conversations about the importance of the community of van life and getting to know other people and how that can really just boost your experience as a van lifer, as well as talking a lot about, things we wish we knew when we started out van life and all these different great topics and conversations we want to have that will help you get started in your van life journey, as always, every Wednesday night. And today we're talking to Josh, who is also known as the Boondocker, and he has so much experience in van life, so I'm excited for you guys to be able to ask your questions and talk to him about his experience as well. And so I'll actually let him introduce himself because he's already here.
Hey Tori, how you doing? I'm doing well,
So,
thanks.
let's get started just with, the basics. So, you're a van lifer. How long have you been a van lifer and how did you get started?
I've been a van lifer since 2017, about 5 years. And back in 2016, I had sold a successful real estate company in South Florida. I was the typical like Miami guy going out to fancy restaurants and driving fancy car, waterfront condo and all that stuff. And there was just no adventure to my life. And I wouldn't say that I was unhappy. It's just there was something missing. I was kind of working for the weekends and just working a lot and spending money on things that I didn't really need. And yeah, I just really got into like whitewater kayaking, and I wanted to do a lot more of that. So I sold my company, built out a van. A lot of people in South Florida thought I was crazy. It's not really something that people do on the East Coast, let alone Miami. And took off and hit the road. Yeah.
So that's really awesome. I was actually reading a lot about your story and what you were, how you were inspired. And I thought it was really interesting that you were inspired by a lot of books that you were reading. I'd love for if you could talk about the book that inspired you.
Yeah, well, there's so many books that inspired me, but I mean, my biggest influence is Walden by Henry David Thoreau. Um, he talks about a lot about self-reliance. And the book was written like 100 and over 150 years ago, but a lot of the things that he was talking about in the book um, are still applied today. Just about society, civilization, consumerism, um, and just kind of living in nature and a simpler life, more minimal life. And it's pretty heavy read, but I mean, I have so many highlighted passages in that book. It's like
I love that book as well, and I think it's really great when we can take the inspiration. And it seems awesome that you actually took what you read and you really put it and applied it into your life. Was it scary for you going from, reading about those things and thinking about them into actually enacting and moving into your van and, going on the road for the first time? How was that for you?
it wasn't really scary. Like once I make up my mind to do something, like I pretty much do it. Again, living in Miami, and you got to remember, this is back in like 2016 when van life really wasn't a thing. I mean, it was kind of like an early adopter phase back then. There was some pioneers, that were started doing it, and then the early adopters. I like to think that I'm like kind of one of the early adopters back in 2016. And there were a lot of people out west doing it, maybe in the hundreds of people doing it out west, but it wasn't really that big of a deal like on the East Coast, especially in Miami. And so all of my friends, like everybody that I was friends with back then in Miami, they were all like living this life of excess, and they really like tried to talk me out of it. They didn't really understand it. Again, this is back in like now it's kind of like mainstream, but I don't know. But actually, I didn't really show anybody my van until it was done. And then once it was done, I kind of had a party before I left, and everybody was like, "Oh, okay, now I kind of get it." And then, um, so it went from "You're crazy. Why are you walking away from this like business and this life?" to "Okay, now I kind of get it." To a few years later, it's like the pandemic is like, "Oh, how can I do that? Like, how can I get into that?" So it's just like it's kind of cool to see.
When people would say to you, like, I'm not really understanding why you're doing that, or different comments like that when people don't understand and there's kind of like, making those odd comments, what was something that you would say to them or that you were thinking to yourself to, help them understand better?
Honestly, if you're considering doing van life, don't tell anybody. Just don't tell anybody, because some people are going to try and talk you out of it. Some people are going to like try and influence you. It's just better to just go with your gut, go with your instinct, follow your dreams, and just don't let anybody talk you out of it. But if you are going to tell somebody, then you just say like this, listen, this is the path I'm choosing, and I'm sure about it, and I'm happy with my decision. Just be happy for me.
So you have a lot of passion projects now that have kind of come about, that are very van life centered. I would love if you could introduce some of those and talk about those.
Yeah, I guess, well, during the pandemic, I started VanLife Outfitters, which we can go a little bit more into. Um, you know, uh, but it's during the pandemic, a friend of mine, and I reconnected, Zach, who's my business partner now on VanLife Outfitters, and he had a really successful blog about how to build out your van, kind of a DIY blog on like everything. And this is back in like 2015, 2016, when there's maybe like 2 or 3 blogs on how to build out your van. And so his blog was definitely like the most popular one. And one of the things that we talked about during the pandemic is, we're helping people learn how to do it, but a lot of the people don't know where to get a lot of this stuff. And so I teamed up with him and invested and kind of came on board full time doing Van Life Outfitters, where we kind of like curate the products that we recommend, that we put into our van builds, and that we've road tested. So kind of like by van lifers for van lifers. And it's sort of like a one-stop shop. You get the information and the products, and the support. Really, kind of like you get to talk to these van life experts when you're buying these products, and we can tell you how to install it, how to use it, what the differences are between the products. And then there's videos and blog posts and wiring diagrams. It's all free on our website for you to go and check out, and really kind of it's all about like empowering people to build the van themselves, because not everybody can afford some of these van builders to build out a van for them. And so we want to make it as easy as possible to build out the van. Um, and then kind of another project that I'd love to talk about is the Florida Van Life Gathering, which is happening in a couple weeks,
Yeah,
actually.
that's very exciting. It's like a meetup, right, for van lifers?
It's more of a social meetup than an expo. There are going to be builders there and vendors there to kind of like sell you stuff, or talk about building out your van, or even selling you a van. But unlike a lot of the other gatherings and expos, where it's mainly just kind of like a trade, almost like a trade show, an outdoor trade show, this is going to be like a really social gathering. In my 5 years of van life, I've been to tons of gatherings and expos and meetups everywhere, anything from like free ones to paid ones. And this one is going to be, it's a paid meetup, but we're providing a lot of value for the meetup. We have live music, um, workshops, all kinds of fun like trivia nights, and food trucks and beer tents. And it's going to be set up for van lifers predominantly. So we're actually going to have we're on pace for over 300 vans at this event. It's in beautiful Central Florida, in like this amazing county park with with Lacucci River Park, and it's just like old growth oak trees with moss hanging down as far as the eye can see. I checked the weather today; it's going to be like 73 degrees and sunny. We'll see if that holds, but it's pretty much it's very low precipitation in February. That like February is the best month in Florida. It's 2 weeks after the RV Super Show. And then we'll have day passes too. So if you're living in the Tampa, Orlando, or anywhere in Florida, really is going to be like within a 1 to 3 hour drive of our event. You can come by for the day and just talk to builders, talk to van lifers, tour vans. Where else can you tour 300 vans? And check out 300 vans. You're going to meet some of your favorite Instagrammers and YouTubers are going to be there. And just really kind of hang out and celebrate van life. That's what this event is all about, is celebrating van life and celebrating the van life
Yeah,
community.
that's awesome. I think one of the most important parts of van life that I have discovered, I've been a van lifer for about 2 years now, and I regret that I waited so long to really join the community and get to meet people, because they're so incredible and they really help you not only, make great friendships and help you on your journey, but also teach you a lot about van life. And as someone who's starting out, that'd be a great resource to be able to go and see a bunch of vans and be able to meet people and really get immersed in the community. That really helps you along the way. So that's really awesome that you're doing that. It sounds really exciting, and I wish I could go, but I'm nowhere close. That's super awesome that you are putting that together and that you're creating that as a resource to van lifers. What was kind of the inspiration behind that for you and getting started in that?
Well, it was like basically during the pandemic, all the events were getting canceled. And we were just like, there's really not a ton of events on the East Coast. There's plenty on the West Coast, but there's nothing on the East Coast. We want to celebrate Florida. It's our kind of home turf. Back in like 2021 and 2022, when everything was like getting canceled, the governor in Florida was just like, we don't care. We're like, everything's open, nothing's canceled. Come on down to Florida. So we're like, we got to do something. If all these other events are getting canceled, we got to do something. It's been a lot of work to plan this. But going back to what you were saying about like the community and helping each other, that was like a main focus for us on this event. We really want to education is a big part of this gathering. It's all free, like all the workshops are free. Victron Energy, which is the largest electronic components manufacturer in the marine and RV and camper van industry, is our title sponsor. So they're going to be there with their training trailer doing every other hour, they're going to be doing a training. Victron's going to be there with their whole team doing trainings on how to set up your electrical system, which is electrical. Let's face it, electrical is like the most intimidating part of a van build. So there's going to be that. There's going to be some of our builders that are going to be there are also going to be teaching workshops on, you name it. We have our schedule on our page. Our website is floridavanlife.com, and then /schedule. You can see the event map. You can see the schedule with all the workshops and all the activities that are going to be planned for the event. But one of the main focuses, other than just generally like connecting with our van life neighbors, is a big part of this is free education. Because that's what our whole Van Life Outfitters, our whole company is based on, is like educating people. Absolutely. And empowering them.
What would you say is, from starting out in van life, for someone who's been here for a while and is kind of isolated, or if they're up here in the Northeast like me, where it's a bit harder to actually meet in person some van lifers, what would you say is like the benefits or how to find community?
That's a really good question. Obviously Seeker is a great app for meeting other van lifers specifically. There's obviously Facebook groups. And then another great resource is one of my passion projects, my kind of side project, is an app that I've also developed, and it's launched and it's in the Apple App Store. It's called Adventurist, just Adventurist. And that is actually connecting people with others in their area that are interested in the same outdoor activities. So it's not just specifically van life, but we do have van life as one of the activities in the app. But I wanted to create an app that helped you easily and quickly connect with other people that are looking to do the same outdoor activities. So for me, it's like whitewater kayaking and rock climbing. And there is Facebook groups, but the thing that I don't like about Facebook is you're always, especially in the Facebook groups, it's like people trying to sell you gear. It's like people posting photos from their trips with their dogs and grandchildren and stuff like that. It's ads, like every second post is an ad. And so with Adventurist, we're not trying to sell you anything. We're not going to be exposed to ads. It's all it is just you go on, you put in what activities you're trying to do, you post what you want to do, and you just look for other people looking to do the same things.
That you're able to provide community for people without having them to pay for anything, or all those different downsides that you can see for sure. What was kind of what started you off wanting to make that project? It was your you wanting to find people like you. What else kind of inspired that project?
Yeah, thanks for asking. It was kind of I felt like I was kind of an outlier because I was traveling by myself before the pandemic, before van life was even a thing. I was like, is this really even an app, going to be an app? Because there's probably like at that time there's probably like maybe 5,000 people in the country doing van life. I don't know. That's just probably a guess, but like, um, but I was constantly looking for people to go kayaking with. And, when you're moving, you can't really build a community. So I was basically going on all these Facebook groups and just finding it kind of frustrating to sift through the kind of the endless, slog of posts on Facebook groups. And I was like, there's got to be an easier way. And then sometimes I would just go down to the river and like sit at a put-in and wait for people and ask them if I could go with them. And then also the other aspect was to find other van lifers. And this was kind of the infancy of the VanLife app and Seeker, so it wasn't really a thing, and I wasn't really trying to compete with them. But I did want to find a way to incorporate VanLife into Adventurist and find other van lifers. And so it was really kind of like I wanted to create an app for myself and solve my own problem. And then I was thinking of other use cases. People who had just moved to a new city need to find activity partners. People have a group of friends, but their friends are always busy on the weekends, or they're working, they're with their wife or their husband, and they can't go. So there's tons of different. Or the other big one is you're just getting into an activity, and so you don't have that network of friends yet to kind of help you get into it. And so you can go onto the app and find people that are further along than you, and hopefully they're willing to kind of take you out as sort of a pay it forward type of thing, where they take you out if you're a beginner, or maybe you can exchange. Maybe I'm a beginner rock climber, but I'm an expert whitewater kayaker. Maybe I can find somebody else that wants to get into whitewater kayaking, but they're an expert rock climber. So there's kind of an exchange there. And so I kept thinking about it, and there's like, it's not just travelers. There's tons of other use cases that completely apply. And there's tons of other use cases that I didn't even talk about.
Yeah, so I've just kind of noticed in a lot of different communities, I think the van life community specifically is very strong and very tight-knit, and people really love that connection. What do you think it is about people who are, outdoorsy people who are living in vans that really brings community together?
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like nature. This is kind of like my quote is like, nature is like the ultimate psychedelic. It's like something about getting into nature like relaxes you, and just washes away any kind of like depression or mental issues that you're having. At least for the time for me, at least for the time that I'm outdoors, that's what happens to me. And if you notice, like especially I notice when I'm traveling in my van full time, and you're traveling in a national park or a state park, and everybody's happy. Everybody's saying hi to each other when they pass each other on the trails. And when you get to the parking lot, everybody's just super stoked and happy. And when you leave the state park or the national park and you have to go back into the city to get groceries or do laundry, and you look at the expression on everybody's faces, and they're just kind of like very like very serious, and they kind of look upset or detached, and they don't say hi to each other. So I don't know what it is about and then about like nature and van life, and so all these people that are in van life, they have built literally a vehicle, both figuratively and literally, I guess, to get them closer to nature, and so they're kind of like-minded in that way. So I feel like that's like kind of the commonality with van lifers and the outdoors.
I'd love to kind of switch gears back to, you were talking about van life outfitters earlier, and I'd love to ask you just some of your experience. What would you say, it's kind of like a two-part question, what would you say is some of the best products that are just underrated or not talked about that you have on your website or that you've just seen?
Wow, where do I begin? That's such a good question. Well, um, hmm. I think it one of the big products now, because when I first started doing van life, they didn't even have 12-volt air conditioners. It wasn't even like really a thing. But now like a lot of people are putting them in. If you have them, if people have the means to put them in, people are putting them in. But the big problem with the 12-volt air conditioners is powering those up, or having a battery bank big enough to power those up. And so when you have a large battery bank, you need a way to charge those battery banks, and you just can't do that with solar alone. And most van lifers don't like campgrounds, and they don't want to be plugged into shore power. And then you have DC to DC charging, which, most factory alternators, you don't want to go above, 60 amps or 70 amps, or else you're going to tax out the alternator. So what a lot of people are doing now, and what we've kind of led the charge with, is a secondary alternator charging system. And it is pricey, but you're almost charging capacity as you're driving. So you're going from like 70 amps per hour of charging. You're going to like 200 to 250 amps of charging. So you could charge like a 600 amp hour battery bank from like 10% to full in like 2 to 3 hours of driving. So that's huge. What we're kind of focusing on at VanLife Outfitters is utilizing the engine of the van for as many of the systems as possible. So we have a water heater that heats your water using your coolant from your engine. So it's routing your coolant from your engine, sending it back to your water heater, and then sending it back to your engine. So it's almost like free hot water anytime you drive. So if you're like me, I'm driving every 2 to 3 days, and I have hot water all the time. But if you're not driving every 2 to 3 days, it does have an electrical element in it. So all these people are putting in these Bosch electric water heaters, but you can pay a little bit more and have a water heater that doesn't dip into your battery bank at all. So those are two exciting products. One product that we're kind of like the exclusive dealer on are flat jacks, which is like an inflatable leveling system. And those are the ultimate van life. I think that they're the ultimate van life product because they fold flat, like they're like flatter than a laptop. So they don't take up any space in your van. They set up in seconds. If you have an onboard compressor, it's like less than a minute, like 30 seconds. If you have like just a regular 12-volt compressor, it takes like 2 to 3 minutes to inflate them. And so leveling blocks are really annoying because you have to like kind of like drive on them and like make sure you're on them, and they mess up your tires and they get really dirty. These, you literally just put them in front of your tires, you drive onto them, you inflate them, and they take up no space, they take up no weight. You don't ever have to replace. They're heavy duty, so like leveling blocks you have to replace every year. Those are 3 products. I could go on and on. We could talk for like hours on all the products, but we have a really good set of blog posts at vanlifeoutfitters.com where we talk about our favorite products and the cutting edge van life products, so to speak.
Yeah, that's incredible. All 3 of those were mind-blowing, and it's, they aren't talked about enough because I really haven't heard much about those. So that's really incredible. I mean, storage space, weight space on those last ones, that's, always key. Kind of flipping that question, what would be some of the popular products that you think are overrated or that you have seen that you think have better alternatives or just are too talked about?
I'd have to think about that one. But going back to that electrical question, I kind of want to tie these in. I really think solar is overrated, especially if you can put in a really powerful DC to DC charging system. The thing that I don't like about solar is it takes up a lot of space on your roof. But the big thing is you have to park in the sun to charge your batteries. So it's like you're literally baking in your van to charge your batteries. And like you could fill up your whole roof with solar panels, and you might not even get close to what you could with a really good DC to DC charging system. So the DC to DC charging system, you're charging rain or shine, day or night. Whenever you're driving, you can even idle your van, which I don't really like to do because it's not good for the environment. But if in an emergency, you could idle your van and charge your batteries. But if you're like me or most van lifers, you're going to be traveling every 3 or 4 days. So with a decent sized battery bank and that a good DC to DC charging system, I really think that that's vastly outweighs the benefits of solar, because it's kind of a catch-22. You don't want to be baking in your van just so you can run your air conditioner. It's like, or your fans. But so that's a big one. Um, um, I personally, I have to think about that a little bit more. Let's go to the next question, and I'll see if I can. I'll see if I can. Those electric water heaters, I don't like dipping into your. I don't like dipping into your battery bank if you don't need to. And so those electric water heaters, you have to remember to turn them off most of the time. You have to turn it on like 20 to 30 minutes and before you want the hot water. It's kind of annoying. And so like anything that you can do to like where you don't have to dip into your battery bank. Induction cooktops are great. The thing that I don't like about induction, I actually use a camping stove because I like to cook whenever I'm at a campsite or hiking. I like to take that camping stove with me, which you really can't do with an induction cooktop, or else you have to have a really long extension cord.
Kind of switching gears off of that, I know that your topic for the Project VanLife virtual summit that we're going to have later on this year is things you want to change about your first vehicle. I would love to talk more about, just a few of those things, kind of give us maybe like a teaser of what you're going to be talking about in your presentation that you're going to be doing at the summit, and just kind of talk about some of those things that you have on your mind about what you would have changed when you first started out.
Yeah, thank you. Shoe storage is a big one that I think a lot of people don't think about, but it's for me, it's really important. It sounds kind of silly, but like when you come into your van, you're tracking a lot of dirt from the trail or from wherever, mud, dirt. So on my second van that I built out, I put in a lot of dedicated shoe storage. So when I'm done hiking, I sit in the sliding doorway to my van. I take off my shoes and I put them in a cabinet that's right there. So that was a big one. That was really annoying for me. Dedicated trash and laundry is a good thing to put in. Dedicated. Another big thing was my fridge was under my counter on my first van, and putting away groceries and getting groceries out of the fridge was kind of annoying. I was like, pulling out my back just to get groceries. So on my second van, I actually put my van at eye level, and it really makes it feel more homey because you can just stand up, open your fridge door, and have access to your fridge. Just little things like that. Putting your gray water tank on a 12-volt switch, so you don't have to manually open your gray water tank. On my first van, I was emptying my urine tank a lot on my toilet. So I actually set my second van up to have my urine go into a tank under the van that I can empty at a dump station. So you don't have to like take that bucket out of your toilet and like empty your cassette. So just little things like that. I basically took all the inconveniences from my first van, a spice rack, so that you don't, every time you need to get spices out, you don't have to open a cabinet, just like a spice rack right on the wall. And I just have like a list of like 20 or 30 things that I'll share with the Project VanLife online gathering.
What would you say to someone who is starting out and trying to make sure that they don't miss anything or have any regrets? What would you say is a good way to make sure you're covering all the bases, that you're really liking the design layout you're going with, etc.?
So I would recommend renting a van for sure, or going to like an event like the Florida VanLife Gathering. Anywhere, even if honestly, it's worth, if you have to drive a day to get to the event, that's going to have a decent amount of vans for you to check out. I really think it's worth it, because and obviously go down the YouTube rabbit hole, but I would say go to an event where you can check out tons of floor plans and talk to the people that live in that van and ask them what they like and they didn't like about their van. Go down the YouTube rabbit hole, rent a van. Those are a couple of the big ones. yeah, I think that's covering kind of all the bases. If you know somebody that's doing van life, definitely try and talk to them. But really a good thing also, if you've already made up your mind to do van life, and maybe you've even like bought your van but you haven't built it out yet, just throw a mattress in the back, throw a cooler in there, and start taking weekend trips, and just start figuring out like what you want out of van life. Some people don't even go into nature with van life. My friend Scott Watson, he's like the urban camping expert, and he's not super into the outdoors. Shout out to him. Go small, live large on YouTube. But so if you're not into nature, maybe you have different needs. I personally, I I need a lot of. I'm all about like collect memories, not things. But I have a lot of gear for all the stuff I'm into, so I need a lot of gear storage. So that the kind of like booth in the back that converts into a bed, that really doesn't work for me because I need to maximize all the storage under the bed. Um, so it's kind of like, yeah, go to an event and talk to van lifers and find a van lifer that even on Instagram or something, or on Project Van Life, if you see a post of a van lifer that matches your lifestyle. Maybe you're really into cooking or something, so maybe you want a chef's kitchen in your van and you're not into gear storage. So find a van lifer that kind of matches your lifestyle, and then pick their brain and try and get as much free knowledge out of them as you can.
Absolutely, I completely agree. Going back a little bit to how you're talking about, you would use a lot of your storage for, your gear and whatnot, and talking about even farther back how you were talking about when you first moved into a van, you're selling all of your things, and that you were talking a lot about in the article that I read about minimalism and how you really valued that and you were getting rid of so much of your stuff. What would be your advice to someone who's, about to get into van life and they have all of these different things and they're trying to, become more minimalistic? What would be your advice to them?
Yeah, that's a good one. You just keep paring down and paring down and paring down. If it doesn't fit in if everything doesn't fit in your closet at home, like you have to, like, everything that you think you're going to bring in your van, like if it doesn't fit in your closet at home, like a double closet, like it's not going to fit in your van. So um, pare down. I'm all about having one thing that accomplishes multiple purposes versus having multiple things that accomplish the same purpose. So going back to that, having that cooktop, that camping cooktop, it's kind of a little bit inconvenient because you don't have a built-in cooktop. But I would rather have a cooktop that is a little bit inconvenient, that I only have one of, versus having a cooktop just for the van and then a cooktop that I take camping or take to the picnic table at the campground or wherever. So and then you have another cooktop for backpacking. So it's just like, um, having trying to find things that accomplish multiple purposes is a big one for me. And then just really paring down, and whatever you think that you're going to need, um, uh, like you need to be absolutely sure that you're going to be using that on a daily or weekly basis. If you think you're going to maybe use it every once in a while, it's probably not worth bringing. You could figure out a way to like get around it. Like a big thing for me is, like, I'm not super into mountain biking, and I did bring a mountain bike with me on my first trip, and I probably shouldn't have, because mountain biking for me is kind of like my fourth or fifth favorite thing to do, and so I probably can get away with just, you know, at a lot of these places where you go, you can rent a bike. And for the, 20 times a year that 10 or 20 times a year that I'm going to be using a bike, I probably could have utilized that space in the van a lot better, and just rented paid an extra, a couple $100 to rent bikes over that course of that year, than bring about a mountain bike with me that I didn't really use. So, yeah, I guess that's a little bit of information, but I
I
don't know.
think I absolutely think the renting
Yeah.
idea is such a good idea, and it's great to hear that experience of having large things and wanting to rent. I think that's really awesome. On the flip side, I think there's a lot of things that like you were saying, my first few trips, I was like I had them in here and I just never used them. Many examples of that. My books. I always think I'm going to read and I never actually read, but I have a whole bookshelf of books. I found on it also with that though is that if I took it out of my van, for some reason, suddenly I wanted it and suddenly I needed it, and then I would go buy it. And I had this big problem with that between I took books out and then I started buying books when I took them out, and then I took all my candles out because I wasn't using them, and then I bought like 10 more candles. It was like, so I think there's a little bit of a balance of, absolutely like really weigh down, like take out as much as you can, but know that if you take things out that you love, you might just end up rebuying them down the line because, so going minimalistic, but don't really push yourself too far.
Yeah, I think of van life. I think van life is all about trading convenience and comfort for freedom. In a sentence, if somebody asked me like, "What's van life all about?" It's the exchange of a little bit of comfort for a lot of freedom. And so, if you're a paper person for books, that might mean you might have to listen to some audiobooks or get a Kindle. And it might be a little bit more difficult, but like you just have to kind of do it. But for me, what I like doing is I like going. A lot of my family lives in Boston and South Florida. So what I like doing is in the winter going back for a couple of months, and I did this for 3 years, is going back home for a couple of months, visiting with family, but also iterating your van and like, maybe replacing something for something else or fixing something that you didn't like, without getting too crazy, but like fixing something that you didn't like about your van, if you can change it or, like, or swapping out things. So I got rid of that mountain bike on my first trip home. I got rid of it and replaced it with other things. And so I had a similar problem with the books. And I just got a Kindle and I started listening to audiobooks. And the audiobooks is awesome because, especially for me, I like autobiographies of people that I admire. And it's kind of like cool because while you're driving, you kind of tune out and you're looking at the road, but you're almost picturing their life movie going in front of you. And it's kind of like having them sitting in the passenger seat telling you their life story. And so I mean, I probably go through 20 and podcasts too, obviously. I know this is going to be a podcast and hopefully people listen to it. I think there's a lot of good information here, but that time spent driving is like, I kind of call it found time, where it's like really valuable time. I used to hate driving, and when I started doing van life, I like love it because I get to learn and do things that I enjoy.
Absolutely. Hey, are some of the qualities that you think van life really empowers or teaches you to be better at? Or for example, I think you have to be really adaptable with van life. I mean, things are going to be up and down all day long. What are some of the traits or things that you feel like you've gotten better at while living in a van because of all of the ups and downs?
Yeah, kind of what I was just talking about is like accepting that the universe is in control, and um, things that you think are bad that are happening to you during your travels might not actually be bad. You don't know until the whole thing plays out. And things that you might think that are happening to you that are good might not be good. It really helps you grow as a person in terms of dealing with adversity. Um, it definitely forces you to learn how to, if you didn't build out your van yourself, or you partially built it out, it's definitely going to teach you how to adapt and solve problems, fix things. It's just going to make you an all around more rounded person, in my personal opinion. Um, so yeah, it's really just learning how to deal with things and not get upset, because it's just kind of like, when you're doing van life, it's like almost every day you're like, oh, that's van life, just roll with it.
What would you say would
So.
be your best piece of advice for someone who is starting out, who is unsure about what they're getting into? They don't want to, confuse the Instagram basic, what you see, the confusing everything's pretty and nice. What would you say to them that they're trying to figure out, what is it really like? What would be your advice to them?
Try and find some of those real YouTubers or Instagrammers that are really kind of documenting van life as truthfully as possible. I would say like 80 or I don't want to scare people off. I would say 80 or 90% of van life for me has been magical. So um, but there is, it's like anything on Instagram. It's not real. It's like it's what you see on Instagram is not real. Like all these people that are making all this money, it's not always real. So just be careful who you're paying attention to on Instagram. Go to van life gatherings and talk to real van lifers. Those are the real people. Those are the realest people that you're going to meet are at these van life gatherings, and just talk to them. They're open. They're usually sitting in a chair in front of their van, drinking a beer, and they're just really friendly, open people to talk to. So come to the Florida Van Life Gathering. You'll be able to talk to 300 to 500 van lifers at that event. Definitely rent a van for sure if you have the ability, the financial means to rent a van for a weekend or a week or even a month. That'll give you a pretty good taste of van life. But there's when I first started doing van life, there was like 5 to 10 builders in the country. Now there's like 500. There was 5 to 10 YouTube channels. Now there's however many. So there's a lot more information on van life than there was in 2016. So do your due diligence. But I think the best thing to do is go and talk to real van lifers at an event.
When you're saying that, there wasn't a lot of information back then, it reminds me of when I was car camping, like in 2018, and it was just, there was no information on it, and I was really struggling with it. And I think, now in, 2023, there is so much information and people we can reach out to and talk to, like you're saying. And anyone who's thinking, I don't want to be a nuisance to someone on Instagram, like this community is so, like, we want to help people. We want you to reach out and be able to answer your questions. And, an event like that, a van life gathering like you're talking about, is just people wanting to encourage and help people get into this lifestyle and understanding what it was like when they were getting into it and all the questions they had. So that is so incredible, and it sounds like an amazing event, and it's going to be a great time for you. And I hope anyone listening, can also, look into that and see if they can go as well. If, on an ending note, what else would you like to make sure everyone, you can tell everyone like an ending note, or anything else you want to add people can hear?
Yeah, just going back to Van Life Outfitters, our whole goal for Van Life Outfitters, our mission is to empower people, to get into van life and build out their own adventure vehicles and camper vans, and educate and provide the resources that people, make it easier for people to do that. With the Florida Van Life Gathering, our main goal with that is to celebrate van life, to educate people, to invite the community of the East Coast, the Southeast, Florida. We have people coming from as far for sure. I know, like, as far as Arizona, but I think also even further. But just the surrounding community, and kind of like explaining what van life is, showing them what van life is, providing workshops that help them with making the decision easier, to make the decision to build out your own van easier. And so those are really the main things that I'd like to get across is Van Life Outfitters. Check out Van Life Outfitters and the Florida Van Life Gathering. And then if you want to contact me, you can reach out to me on Instagram at the.boondocker, or josh@vanlifeoutfitters.com. And if you have any questions about anything else, like Adventurist or anything like that.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for coming on last minute. I know I messaged you this morning and so I really appreciate, you being flexible and coming on and sharing so many of the great passion projects and things that you're working on. And I think, we've really hopefully been able to talk to a lot of people who have been able to take what you're saying with so many great pieces of advice and really take that to heart. So I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I hope people got something valuable from this conversation. I've been following Project Van Life for a really long time, and I really love what you guys are doing as well. And we're going to be collaborating on some stuff here in the future. So thank you for having me.